Welcome to Mystic Sleep Tales, a place where calm narration, quiet atmospheres, and gentle stories help you drift peacefully into rest. Before we begin tonight's tale, I would love to know where you're listening from this evening. Leave a quiet word in the comments below. It is always a comfort to see our community stretching softly across the world, from lamplight to lamplight, from one pillow to the next. Now, it is time to get comfortable. Settle into your bed, or your favorite chair, or wherever it is that sleep finds you most easily. Let your shoulders fall. Let the weight in your hands dissolve. Close your eyes if you wish, or let them rest half open, unfocused, upon whatever is nearest. Take a slow, deep breath and hold it gently for a moment, and then release it as though you were setting down something you had been carrying for a very long time. Good. And another. Let the air fill your chest, and then leave again, carrying with it whatever remains of the day. The hours behind you are finished now. They have done all they can. Whatever was accomplished is enough, and whatever was left undone will wait. It will still be there in the morning, patient and unchanged, and you may attend to it then, with rested hands and a clearer mind. But not now. Now there's only this moment, only the sound of these words, only the gradual unwinding of thought and breath, and the slow, steady pull of sleep drawing closer with each passing second. Let your thoughts soften. If they come, and they will, let them arrive and pass like the sound of a carriage on a distant road, growing louder for a moment and then fading, leaving the silence a little deeper than before. You need not follow them. You need not answer them. They're only passing through, and they will go on their way without you. You are here, and here is where rest begins. Good. You're doing beautifully. Let the stillness settle around you like a blanket drawn up by careful hands. And now, if you are ready, let us go somewhere together. Not far, not to any place of business or worry, only to a quiet street, in a city that sleeps as all cities must, and to a single window, still holding its light against the dark. The year is 1883, and the street is a narrow, respectable one in the Bloomsbury district of London, set back from the wider thoroughfares where the omnibuses still rattle along their routes. It is the kind of street that does not call attention to itself, a row of terraced houses built of brown London brick, their facades darkened with the soot of decades, their front steps scrubbed clean each morning by housemaids whose names are known to no one beyond the neighboring doors. The houses stand shoulder to shoulder, as houses do in this part of the city, sharing walls and chimneys and the quiet understanding that comes from close proximity maintained over many years. It is late in the evening now, past 10 o'clock, and the street has settled into the particular stillness that comes to residential London once the day's commerce is done. The gas lamps stand at intervals along the pavement, their iron posts dark against the sky, each one casting a small circle of amber light that reaches no more than a few feet in any direction. Between the lamps, the darkness lies undisturbed, soft and deep, and overhead the sky is the color of old pewter, too clouded for stars, but not threatening rain, merely holding itself in that patient, heavy stillness that London skies adopt so readily in the cooler months. The air carries the faintest trace of coal smoke, the last exhalations of 100 household fires beginning to burn low, and beneath it the damp mineral smell of the city itself, of stone and iron and wet brick, a smell so familiar to anyone who has lived here that it ceases to register as a smell at all, and becomes simply the texture of the night. One by one, the windows along the street have gone dark. The houses are retiring in their usual order, the upper stories first, where children and servants sleep, and then the parlor floors, where the last cups of tea have been drunk and the last pages of the evening paper turned and folded. Here a curtain is drawn. There a lamp is lowered and extinguished. The rhythm of it is so regular, so predictable, that a person standing at the far end of the street might watch the light recede from window to window like a tide going out, leaving only the black glass behind, reflecting nothing but the faint glow of the gas lamps below. But one window remains lit. It is on the ground floor of number 14, a house indistinguishable from its neighbors in every respect save this one detail. The window is tall and narrow, as most windows are in houses of this period. Its wooden sash painted a dark color that might be green or black, impossible to say in the present light. Behind the glass, a pair of heavy curtains have been drawn nearly closed, leaving only a thin vertical gap, perhaps 2 inches wide, through which the warm light escapes into the street. It is not a bold light, not the kind that announces itself or demands attention. It is quiet and contained, the color of old honey, and it falls in a narrow band across the pavement below, touching the curb and stopping there, as though it knows its place and has no ambition beyond it. Inside the room, behind the curtains, behind the glass, the source of the light is a single gas bracket mounted on the wall to the left of the fireplace. It is a simple fixture of brass, not one of the elaborate gasoliers that adorn wealthier homes, but a plain wall bracket with a single burner fitted with an incandescent mantle, the newer kind that gives off a steadier, whiter light than the old open flame. The mantle glows with a soft, constant brightness, and the light it casts fills the room without harshness, touching every surface with the same even warmth and leaving the corners in a comfortable half-shadow that seems less like darkness and more like privacy. The room itself is a waiting room, belonging to the consulting practice of a physician whose brass nameplate is fixed to the front door and whose hours of consultation are printed on a small card in the window beside the entrance. The card reads 9:30 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon, and below that, in smaller type, by appointment. At this hour, the physician himself has long since retired to his private rooms upstairs, and the consultation room beyond the waiting room is shut and locked, its instruments put away, its examination couch draped with a clean white cloth in readiness for the morning. The practice is closed, as it has been for nearly 6 hours. The building is quiet. There are no patients expected and none arriving. And yet the waiting room remains lit, and it remains occupied. The man sitting in the waiting room is the physician's clerk, a person of perhaps 45 years, though he might be younger and look older, or older and look precisely his age, for there is nothing in his appearance that invites close estimation. He is of medium height and spare build, with dark hair that is beginning to show gray at the temples, cut short and combed flat in a manner common to men of his station. His face is clean-shaven, his features regular, his expression composed in that particular way that belongs to people who have spent many years in rooms where their primary duty is to be present without being conspicuous. He wears a dark suit of decent quality, not new but well-maintained, the kind of suit that might belong to a solicitor's clerk or a bank teller or any number of men who make their living in the quieter offices of London's professional life. His collar is clean. His cuffs are buttoned. His shoes, which are visible beneath the hem of his trousers where they rest upon the floor, are polished to a modest shine. He sits in one of the 4 chairs that line the wall opposite the fireplace, the second from the left, which is the chair he always sits in, though there is no particular reason for this preference, and he has never been asked to explain it. The chairs are of dark wood, mahogany perhaps, with upholstered seats covered in a fabric of deep green, the nap worn smooth in places by the many patients who have sat here before him, waiting their turn. They are not uncomfortable chairs, but neither are they the kind one would choose for a long evening. They are the chairs of a waiting room, designed for temporary occupation, for the 20 or 30 minutes between arrival and consultation, and they possess that quality common to all waiting room furniture of being adequate without being inviting. The clerk does not appear to mind. He sits with his back straight, but not rigid, his hands resting upon his knees, his gaze directed at no particular point in the room. On the small table to his right, a table of dark wood with turned legs and a surface marked by the pale rings of many cups of tea, there rests a single cup and saucer. The cup is empty, or very nearly so, and has been for some time. A thin residue of tea has dried at the bottom, forming a faint brown crescent. Beside the cup lies a folded newspaper, the evening edition, its pages undisturbed since it was placed there earlier in the day by the physician's housekeeper, a woman named Mrs. Chalice, who comes each morning at 7 and leaves each evening at 6, and whose routines are as fixed and as quietly essential as the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. The clock. It is a handsome piece, a black marble mantel clock with a white enamel face and Roman numerals, the kind manufactured in great numbers during the middle decades of the century and sold by reputable clockmakers throughout the city. It sits precisely in the center of the mantelpiece, flanked on one side by a small brass candlestick that is never used, and on the other by a ceramic figure of a shepherd that has occupied that position for so long that no one remembers who placed it there or why. The clock ticks with a measured, unhurried rhythm, each second arriving at exactly the interval one would expect, neither hastening nor lingering, and the sound of it fills the room in the way that only a clock in a quiet room can fill it, not loudly, not intrusively, but completely, so that after a time one ceases to hear it as a sound at all and begins to feel it instead, a gentle pulse running beneath the surface of the silence, keeping time with the slow, steady breath of the room itself. The fire in the grate has burned low. It was laid fresh that morning by Mrs. Chalice and lit at 8:30, as it is every morning between October and April, and it has been burning all day, fed at intervals with coal from the brass scuttle that stands on the hearth. No one has tended it for several hours now, and the flames have subsided into a bed of glowing embers, orange and gray, shifting occasionally with a soft, collapsing sound as a piece of coal settles further into its own ash. The heat it gives off is modest but sufficient, a gentle warmth that reaches the middle of the room and no further, so that the air nearest the fire is comfortable and the air nearest the door carries a faint chill, and between the two there is a boundary, invisible but perceptible, where the warmth gives way to coolness, like the edge of a pool. The clerk is aware of this boundary. He sits just within the reach of the fire's warmth, close enough to feel it on his knees and the backs of his hands, and this small comfort is enough. He does not need more. Above the fireplace, mounted on the wall in a heavy gilt frame, there hangs an oil painting of modest size and unremarkable quality, depicting a pastoral scene of the kind that was fashionable in consulting rooms and professional offices throughout the latter half of the century. It shows a stretch of green countryside, a copse of trees, a path leading to a stile, and beyond the stile a meadow where a few sheep graze with that particular stillness that painted sheep possess, a stillness that has nothing to do with real sheep, which are restless and vocal creatures, but which serves the purposes of the painting admirably, suggesting peace and tranquility and the uncomplicated beauty of the English landscape. The painting has hung in this room for as long as the clerk can remember. He does not look at it now. He has looked at it many times before, and it has told him everything it has to tell, and what it told him was very little, which was, he supposes, exactly what it was meant to tell. The wallpaper is of a pattern common to rooms of this kind, a repeating motif of small flowers and leaves printed in tones of green and gold upon a cream ground. It is neither handsome nor ugly. It is the kind of wallpaper that exists to fill a wall without drawing attention to itself, and in this it succeeds completely. Here and there, where the light from the gas bracket falls at a certain angle, the gold in the pattern catches the glow and holds it for a moment, a brief gleam that appears and disappears as the eye moves, too subtle to be called decorative, but too present to be ignored, like a thought that surfaces and submerges in the quiet waters of a mind at rest. There is a door in the wall to the right of the fireplace, painted the same dark color as the skirting boards, and fitted with a brass handle that has been touched by so many hands over so many years that its surface has been polished smooth by use alone. This door leads to the physician's consulting room, and it is closed. There is another door directly opposite, across the room, which is the door by which patients enter from the small entrance hall. This door, too, is closed. The clerk sits between them, equidistant from both, as though stationed at the precise center of a transaction that has long since concluded. The room is perhaps 12 feet by 14, not large but not oppressively small. The ceiling is high, as ceilings are in houses of this period, and the cornice that runs along the junction of wall and ceiling is of plain plaster, molded in a simple egg and dart pattern that casts a thin line of shadow in the gaslight. The floor is covered with a carpet of Turkish pattern, its reds and blues faded by years of foot traffic into a muted harmony that is more pleasant than its original colors must have been, the kind of carpet that improves with age and use, growing softer and more agreeable as its brightness diminishes. The clerk shifts his weight very slightly in the chair. It is a small movement, barely perceptible, the kind of adjustment one makes without conscious thought, the body redistributing itself in search of a comfort it does not quite need, but would prefer. The chair creaks, once a brief complaint of wood and joint, and then is silent again. The clock ticks on. The fire settles. Outside, in the street, the silence has deepened. The last of the neighboring windows went dark some 20 minutes ago, and the street now belongs entirely to the gas lamps and the night. A cat crosses the pavement at the far end, moving with that liquid, unhurried gait that cats adopt when they are confident of their solitude, its shadow stretching and contracting beneath the lamp as it passes through the light and out the other side. The sound of its feet, if there is one, does not reach the interior of the room. The only sounds that enter from outside are distant ones, carried on the still night air from streets and neighborhoods further off, the faint rumble of a late omnibus on Tottenham Court Road, the bark of a dog somewhere to the south, a sound that arrives, already fading, and is gone before the ear can fix its direction. These sounds do not disturb the quiet of the room. They confirm it. The clerk reaches forward without hurry and lifts the teacup from the saucer. He raises it to his lips, tilts it, finds it empty, and sets it down again. The porcelain meeting the saucer with a soft chime that rings for half a second and then is absorbed into the larger silence. This is something he has done before, perhaps 10 minutes ago, perhaps longer, the gesture of a man who has finished his tea, but whose hands remember the habit of drinking and repeat it out of a kind of gentle forgetfulness, the way one might reach for a book on a table where no book has been placed, or turn toward a window, expecting to see someone who left the room an hour ago. He does not seem disappointed by the empty cup. He sets it down and returns his hands to his knees. On the opposite wall, between the door and the corner, there stands a narrow bookcase of 3 shelves, made of the same dark wood as the chairs and the table, and upon its shelves there rests a small and carefully chosen collection of volumes. These are not the physician's medical texts, which are kept in the consulting room, but the books provided for the entertainment of waiting patients, and they reflect the taste of someone the physician, his wife, or possibly Mrs. Chalice, who believed that patients waiting for a consultation would benefit from reading matter that was informative without being alarming and diverting without being frivolous. There is a volume of Mr. Dickens. There is a guide to the churches of London. There is a book about the natural history of British birds, with colored plates that have been admired by many hands and show the gentle wear of frequent turning. There's a bound collection of Punch from the year 1876, and there is, on the lowest shelf, a Bible with a cracked spine and gilt edges, the kind of Bible that is placed in rooms not because anyone expects it to be read, but because its presence is considered proper and its absence would be noticed. The clerk has read them all, at one time or another, during the long hours of his working days when the flow of patients slowed and the room fell quiet and the afternoon stretched ahead like a road with no turnings. He has a particular fondness for the bird book, which he finds soothing in its methodical descriptions and its careful illustrations. The way each bird is presented against a plain background with its name beneath in italic script, as though the bird had sat for a portrait and wished to be remembered exactly as it was. He knows the plates well enough now that he can picture them without opening the book, the kingfisher in its improbable blues, the wren so small and so perfectly proportioned that it seems less like a real creature and more like an idea of a creature, a platonic wren, the very essence of what a wren should be. But he does not reach for the book tonight. He does not reach for any of the books. The Gaslight is sufficient for reading, but his eyes do not seek the page. They rest instead upon the middle distance, upon nothing, upon the air itself. And in this resting there is something that resembles not inattention, but a very deep and patient attentiveness, as though he were listening to a sound so quiet that the slightest movement might cause him to lose it. The clock on the mantelpiece marks the quarter hour with a single, clear chime, a note that hangs in the air like a drop of water on the point of falling, and then falls and is gone. 10:15. The clerk registers the sound without surprise, without urgency. He has heard this clock strike every quarter for the better part of 8 years, since he first took up his position in this room, and the sound of it has become so thoroughly a part of his experience of the room that he cannot imagine the room without it, cannot imagine what the silence would sound like if the ticking stopped, though he supposes it would sound like something missing, like a sentence left unfinished. like a breath held just a moment too long. His duties, such as they are at this hour, are almost none. During the day, he is the first person a patient sees upon entering the practice. He greets them, takes their name, consults the appointment book, and asks them to take a seat. He manages the physician's correspondence, keeps the accounts in order, files the records, and ensures that the waiting room is presentable at all times. He is, in the physician's words, indispensable, though the clerk himself would not use that word, finding it too large for the work he does, which is, as he sees it, simply the work of being present, of maintaining the room and its order, of ensuring that the small machinery of the practice runs smoothly and without interruption. In the evenings, after the last patient has gone and the physician has retired, the clerk remains for a time to close out the day's accounts and prepare the appointment book for the morning. This work is usually finished by 7 o'clock, 8 at the latest, and after that his presence is no longer strictly required. He could leave. He could put on his coat and hat, extinguish the gas, lock the door behind him, and walk the 12 minutes to his lodgings on Marchmont Street, where a cold supper and a rented room and a narrow bed await him with the same quiet patience with which they await him every night. He could do this, and some nights he does, but not tonight. Tonight, as on many nights, he stays. He has no particular reason for staying, or rather, he has no reason that he could articulate easily if someone were to ask, which no one does. It is not loneliness, exactly, though he lives alone and has done for many years, since before he came to this position, since before a great many things that he no longer thinks about with any regularity. It is not that he dislikes his lodgings, which are clean and adequate, and kept by a landlady who is neither kind nor unkind but efficient, which is, in his experience, the most one can reasonably hope for. It is not that he fears the walk home, which is short and passes through quiet streets that are well enough lit and entirely safe. It is simply that the room holds him. The room, with its steady clock and its low fire and its familiar furnishings, holds him the way a harbor holds a boat, not by force but by the simple absence of any reason to leave. The room asks nothing of him. It makes no demands. It does not require conversation or decision or the expenditure of effort in any direction. It requires only his presence, his quiet, seated presence, and this he can provide without difficulty, without thought, without the small exertion that every other place and every other moment of the day seems to require of him. Here, in this chair, in this room, he is relieved of the obligation to do anything at all, and in this relief there is a comfort so deep and so complete that it resembles, if one were to look at it from a certain angle, something very close to happiness. The fire makes a sound. It is a small sound, a whisper, the sound of ash falling from the underside of an ember and landing upon the grate below, where it joins the fine gray powder that has been accumulating all day. The ember from which the ash is falling glows a little brighter for a moment, as though the loss of its outermost layer has exposed a deeper warmth beneath, and then it dims again, settling back into its patient work of giving up its heat to the room. The clerk watches this without watching it, his gaze near the hearth but not fixed upon it, the fire existing at the edge of his attention, the way a companion's breathing might exist at the edge of one's awareness during a long and comfortable silence. Mrs. Chalice, before she left that evening, had set the room in order as she always does. The cushions on the chairs were straightened. The table was wiped with a damp cloth. The carpet was swept. The brass fender before the fireplace was polished until it caught the light. The curtains were drawn. The newspaper was placed upon the table beside a fresh cup and saucer, and a small pot of tea was prepared and left on the tray in the entrance hall, covered with a knitted cozy of dark blue wool, against the possibility that the clerk might want a cup before he went home. He had poured himself the last of it some time ago, an hour perhaps, and it had been only just warm, the pot having held its heat as long as it could, and then surrendering it gradually, as all warm things must, to the cooler air around it. He had drunk it without complaint. Tea that has been sitting is still tea, and the act of drinking it is still the act of drinking it, and the warmth it carries, however diminished, is still warmth. The cozy now sits on the tray, slightly collapsed, the pot inside it empty. These objects, the tray, the pot, the cozy, the cup and saucer on the table, compose a small still life that the clerk could reconstruct from memory at any time. So familiar has it become. Every evening the same arrangement, the same blue cozy, the same white pot with the small chip on the handle that has been there since before his time. Mrs. Chalice takes the tray away each morning and returns it each evening, and the cycle of preparation and clearing, laying out and taking away, is one of those small domestic rituals that gives the days their structure and their rhythm, the way the striking of the clock gives the hours their shape and their sequence. Outside, a hansom cab passes along the street. The sound reaches the clerk faintly, the clip of hooves on stone, the rattle of iron-rimmed wheels, a sound so characteristic of London at night that it serves not as an interruption, but as a kind of confirmation, proof that the city is still out there, still going about its business, still carrying people from one place to another through the dark. The sound grows, reaches its peak as the cab passes the window, and then diminishes, drawing away down the street and around the corner and out of hearing, leaving the silence not broken, but temporarily deepened, as a pool is deepened by the passing of a stone. The clerk listens to the silence return. It comes back in layers, the way water fills a depression in sand. First, the broad, general quiet of the room, the absence of speech and movement, and then beneath it the ticking of the clock, which is not silence, but which has become so much a part of the silence that it might as well be, and then beneath it the low, almost inaudible hum of the gas in the bracket on the wall, a sound so faint that one must be very still and very quiet to hear it at all, a continuous, unchanging note, neither rising nor falling, like the sound of the room itself breathing. He thinks of nothing in particular. This is not the same as thinking of nothing, which would imply an emptiness, a vacancy, a mind swept clean. Thinking of nothing in particular is something quite different. It is a state in which thoughts are present but unattached, drifting through the mind like clouds through an open sky, casting their shadows briefly and then moving on, leaving the landscape unchanged. A thought about the morning's post drifts past. A thought about the arrangement of the appointment book. A thought about whether the coal in the scuttle will last the night, which it will, because Mrs. Chalice always fills it to the brim. These thoughts arrive and depart with the same gentle, unhurried rhythm as the ticking of the clock, and the clerk pays them no more attention than he pays the clock, which is to say he is aware of them in the way one is aware of the temperature of a room, thoroughly and continuously and without effort. The carpet beneath his feet is soft. He can feel it through the soles of his shoes, the dense pile of it worn thin in the path between the door and the chairs, but still thick where his feet now rest, slightly to the right of that path, in the territory of the second chair. The carpet is one of the oldest things in the room, older than the clerk's tenure, older possibly than the physician's practice, a survivor of decades of foot traffic and spilled tea and the occasional dropped instrument that rolled across the floor and came to rest against the skirting board. Its colors, which must once have been vivid, have softened into a muted palette of rust and indigo and faded cream that is more restful to the eye than any brighter pattern could be, the visual equivalent of a voice that has grown quieter and more pleasant with age. Above, on the first floor, a floorboard creaks. The physician, perhaps, crossing from one room to another. Or it might be nothing at all, merely the house itself adjusting to the change in temperature as the night grows cooler, its timbers contracting slightly, settling into positions they will hold until morning. Old houses are full of such sounds, small, unexplained noises that are as much a part of the building's character as its bricks and its plaster and its paint. The clerk hears the creak and identifies it instantly for what it is, or rather for what it is not, which is anything requiring his attention. He continues to sit. The gas bracket on the wall gives off its steady light without flicker or variation. The incandescent mantle, that small, fragile structure of lime-coated mesh, glows with a white heat that is softer and more constant than the old open flame it replaced. The physician had the mantles fitted 2 years ago, replacing the older burners throughout the ground floor, and the difference was remarkable. A light that was at once brighter and less harsh, steadier and more forgiving. A light that did not dance and throw shadows in the way the open flame had done, but held its ground calmly, illuminating everything within its reach with the same impartial warmth. The clerk had noticed the change on the first morning after the new mantles were installed. The room looked different, not altered in its furnishings or its arrangement, but different in the quality of its stillness, as though the steadier light had steadied the room itself, calmed it, given it a composure it had not quite possessed before. The mantle will need replacing eventually. They all do. The lime coating grows thin and the mesh weakens, and one day, without warning, the mantle crumbles into a fine powder and the light goes out. Mrs. Chalice keeps a supply of replacement mantles in the cupboard in the entrance hall, wrapped in tissue paper and stored in a small cardboard box. And when one fails, she replaces it with the quiet competence that characterizes everything she does. But tonight the mantle is intact, and the light is steady, and the room is held in its glow like an object cradled in a pair of open palms. The clerk's breathing has slowed. Not dramatically, not in the way of someone falling asleep, but gradually by small degrees, the way breathing slows in a room where there's nothing to quicken it. His chest rises and falls with the regularity of something mechanical, something wound and set in motion, and the air enters and leaves his body with a softness that makes no sound at all, or if it makes a sound, then it is a sound so quiet that it exists beneath the threshold of hearing, beneath the hum of the gas and the ticking of the clock, in a register of silence that belongs only to the living body at rest. He has been in this room for so many hours, on so many days, across so many years, that he has developed an awareness of it that goes beyond the visual or the auditory. He knows the room the way one knows a face that has been looked at thousands of times. He knows the exact distance between the chairs. He knows which floorboard beneath the carpet gives slightly when stepped upon, the one just in front of the bookcase, the one that announces the approach of anyone crossing from the door. He knows the precise angle at which the painting above the fireplace hangs, tilted almost imperceptibly to the left, a tilt that has been present for years and that no one has corrected because no one has noticed it, or because those who have noticed it have decided that the correction would constitute a change. And change, in a room like this, is neither necessary nor desired. He knows the sound the door handle makes when turned from the outside, a particular click followed by a slight resistance, and then a release, and he knows the different sound it makes when turned from the inside, which is the same click but without the resistance, as though the door, like the room, is more willing to let people in than to let them out. He knows the smell of the room in the morning before the fire is lit, a smell of cold plaster and furniture polish, and the faintest trace of carbolic from the consulting room beyond. And he knows the smell of the room in the evening, when the fire has been burning all day and the air is thick with warmth and the scent of coal smoke and tea and the old, deep smell of the carpet, which is the smell of wool and dust and time. All of this knowledge sits within him quietly, not as a catalog or a list, but as a kind of bodily understanding, a feeling in the muscles and the bones that is as much a part of him as his own name. He belongs to this room the way a key belongs to a lock, not by design, but by long association, by the gradual wearing of one shape into another until the fit is so exact that separation would seem not merely difficult but wrong. The half-hour strikes. A single chime, the same note as the quarter, but held perhaps a fraction longer, or perhaps not. The clerk cannot say with certainty whether the half-hour chime is the same as the quarter-hour chime, or whether they differ in some way too subtle for him to detect. He has listened for the difference many times, on many quiet evenings, and has never been able to resolve the question, and the fact that it remains unresolved does not trouble him. Some questions are better as questions. Some things are better not known. 10:30. The evening is well advanced. The street outside has achieved its deepest quiet, the quiet that comes to residential London between the last carriages and the first carts, between the end of one day's traffic and the beginning of the next, a window of several hours during which the city seems to pause, to hold its breath, to rest in the manner of a vast and complicated machine that has been switched off and now sits cooling in the dark, its parts still and its purposes suspended. The clerk considers, without urgency, the question of the coal. The fire has burned very low now, reduced to a handful of embers that glow with a deep, ruddy light, orange shading into red at the edges, and the heat they give off has diminished accordingly, withdrawing toward the grate like a tide retreating from shore. The room is not cold, not yet, but the warmth has thinned, and the air carries a slight chill that the clerk can feel on his face and on the backs of his hands. He could rise, take the brass tongs from the stand beside the hearth, and place a few pieces of coal upon the embers. The coal is there, in the scuttle, dark and glossy, waiting. The action would take no more than a minute and would restore the fire to a comfortable blaze. He decides not to, not out of laziness or indifference, but because the current state of the fire, its low, quiet glow, its diminished but still perceptible warmth, seems appropriate to the hour, seems right in a way that a fresh blaze would not be. A fresh blaze would belong to an earlier hour, to 7 or 8 o'clock, when the evening was young and the room was still animated by the residual energy of the working day. Now at 10:30, the fire should be low. It should be giving up its last heat with the same unhurried grace with which the day gives up its last light. And the clerk, sitting within reach of that fading warmth, should be content to receive whatever is offered without asking for more. And he is content. He is, in this moment, very nearly perfectly content, though he would not use that word himself, finding it too deliberate, too self-conscious for what he feels, which is less an emotion than an absence of emotion, a cessation of wanting, a stillness of the spirit that mirrors the stillness of the room. If someone were to ask him what he is thinking, he would say, truthfully, that he is not thinking, or rather that he is thinking the way the clock ticks, automatically, without purpose, each thought following the last in an unbroken sequence that leads nowhere and requires nothing and accomplishes nothing except the continuation of itself. The thin band of light that escapes through the gap in the curtains still falls upon the pavement outside, a narrow stripe of gold across the gray stone. If a person were to walk along the street at this hour, which is unlikely but not impossible, for London never entirely empties, even in its quietest corners, they might glance up at the window and wonder who is still awake, who is keeping that single light burning while the rest of the street slept. They might imagine a scholar bent over his books, or a mother tending a sick child, or an insomniac staring at the ceiling. They would not imagine what is actually there, which is a man in a dark suit sitting in a green chair in a waiting room, doing nothing, waiting for nothing, simply present, simply being in the way that a stone is present in a field or a tree is present in a garden, without effort, without intention, without the need for any justification beyond the fact of its own existence. The room holds him. The light holds the room. The night holds the light. And somewhere beyond all of it, beyond the glass and the curtains and the brick and the stone, the city turns slowly in its sleep, vast and dreaming and unaware of the small, steady glow at number 14, which asks for nothing, which promises nothing, which simply is. The clock ticks. The fire glows. The clerk sits, and the night, unhurried as it always is, continues. In the entrance hall, beyond the closed door, the air is cooler. The clerk knows this without needing to open the door and feel it, because he knows the way this building breathes, the way the warmth from the waiting room seeps beneath the door and meets the cooler air of the hall and creates that thin, shifting boundary where the two temperatures mingle. He has stood in that boundary many times, holding the door for a departing patient, feeling the warmth at his back and the chill at his face, and each time the sensation has struck him as a small, unremarkable illustration of how different conditions can exist side by side, separated by nothing more than a few inches and a closed door. The entrance hall contains a coat stand, a small table upon which the Morning's Post is placed, and an umbrella rack of black cast iron that holds 3 umbrellas and a walking stick that has been there for as long as anyone can remember and that no one has ever claimed. The hall floor is tiled in a checkered pattern of black and white, the tiles slightly uneven where the house has settled over the decades, so that walking across them produces a faint, irregular click beneath the heel, a sound that the clerk associates so completely with arrival and departure that he can hear it now, faintly, in his memory, even though the hall is empty and no one is walking across it. But he is not in the hall. He is here, in the waiting room, in the second chair from the left, and the hall and its contents exist only as knowledge, as a kind of map that he carries in his mind, accurate in its details, but requiring no verification, no visual confirmation. He knows the hall the way he knows the room, which is the way he knows his own hands completely and without surprise. The painting above the fireplace catches a shift in the gaslight, some minute fluctuation in the mantel's glow, and for a moment the painted sheep seem to move, seem to lower their heads fractionally toward the painted grass, a trick of light so brief and so subtle that the clerk cannot be certain it happened at all. He watches the painting for a moment longer, but the sheep have returned to their positions, motionless, permanent, and the meadow and the trees and the path to the stile are exactly as they have always been, undisturbed by the passage of time or the attention of the viewer. He shifts again in the chair, a movement even smaller than the last, a redistribution of weight so slight that it produces no sound, no creak, nothing. His body is finding its final position for the evening, the posture in which it will remain until he decides to stand and make his way home. This may be soon or may not. The decision, when it comes, will come of its own accord, prompted by nothing more dramatic than the recognition that it is time, the way one recognizes that a meal is finished or a conversation has reached its natural end, not because anything has been concluded, but because the moment for conclusion has arrived and has been felt and accepted. The tea residue in the cup has darkened slightly. It is a trivial thing, this darkening a matter of chemistry, of tannins oxidizing in the air, but the clerk notices it because he notices everything in this room, not by choice but by long habit, the way a sailor notices changes in the wind or a farmer notices changes in the soil. The cup and its contents are part of the room, and the room is his domain, and within that domain no change, however small, passes entirely without remark. Mrs. Chalice will wash the cup in the morning. She will take it from the saucer, carry it to the small scullery at the back of the house, wash it in hot water with a sliver of soap, dry it with a clean cloth, and return it to the shelf in the cupboard from which it came. The saucer will receive the same treatment. The tray will be wiped and set aside. The cozy will be placed over a fresh pot, and the cycle will begin again. The clerk finds a quiet satisfaction in this knowledge, not because the washing of a teacup is itself a matter of great interest, but because the predictability of it, the certainty that it will happen and that it will happen in exactly this way, is a kind of assurance, a small proof that the world, for all its vastness and its occasional disorder, contains within it pockets of perfect regularity, places where things proceed as they have always proceeded and will always proceed, unchanging. Reliable, sure. The 3/4 hour sounds. A chime, the same chime, or not the same. The air accepts it and lets it go. 11:15. The night is growing old, though it has many hours yet before dawn. In summer, the first light would already be hinting at the eastern edge of the sky, but this is not summer. This is late autumn or early winter. The precise date is of no importance, and the dawn is still far off, hidden behind hours of darkness that stretch ahead with the same unhurried patience that characterizes everything about this evening. The clerk's eyelids have grown heavy. Not closing, not yet, but lowered slightly, so that the room before him appears through a narrowed aperture, the details softened, the edges blurred, the gaslight reduced to a warm, diffuse glow that touches everything and defines nothing. This is not sleep. It is the anteroom of sleep, the state that precedes it, the gradual loosening of attention that the body performs when it senses that the mind has no further use for alertness and that the time for rest is drawing near. The clerk allows it. He does not fight it, and he does not encourage it. He simply allows it, the way one allows the tide to come in, knowing that it will come whether one allows it or not, but finding it pleasanter to yield than to resist. The sound of the room have simplified. The clock, the gas, the occasional settling of the fire, these three sounds, which are really variations of a single sound, the sound of a room sustaining itself through the night, have merged into a continuous, undifferentiated murmur that the clerk's ears no longer parse into separate elements, but receive as one thing, a unity, a hum, the voice of the room at its most elemental, saying nothing, meaning nothing, simply sounding, the way the earth hums if you press your ear against the ground, not with any message, but with the fact of its own existence. His hands on his knees are warm. The warmth is not from the fire, which has retreated too far to reach him, but from his own body, the patient, inexhaustible warmth of the living organism, which generates its heat from within and carries it to its extremities and offers it to whatever surface it touches, the backs of his hands warming the fronts of his knees through the fabric of his trousers, a small circuit of warmth closed and self-sustaining, requiring nothing from the outside world. On Marchmont Street, 12 minutes away, his room waits for him. The bed is made. The curtain is drawn. The gas is off. The landlady has left a pitcher of water on the washstand and a clean towel on the rail, as she does every evening. And these things are ready for him and will remain ready for as long as he requires them to remain so. There is no urgency. The room will not change in his absence. The bed will not unmake itself. The water will not evaporate. Everything will be exactly as he left it, as it was this morning when he closed the door and descended the stairs and stepped out into the gray light of a London morning and walked the 12 minutes to number 14 and let himself in with the key that he keeps on a chain in his waistcoat pocket. The same key he has carried for 8 years, worn smooth now by the friction of his fingers. But he is not thinking of Marchmont Street. He is not thinking of anything. His thoughts have quietened to a murmur, a background sound, no louder than the hum of the gas, no more intrusive than the ticking of the clock. His body is still. His breathing is slow. His eyes, half closed, rest upon the middle distance, upon the air between himself and the fireplace. And in that air there is nothing to see and nothing to attend to and nothing to do. And this nothingness, this perfect, complete nothingness, is the most restful thing he has ever known. The fire gives up its last visible flame, a brief, blue flicker at the edge of a coal, there and then gone, like a thought that surfaces and vanishes before it can be spoken. The embers remain, glowing softly, their heat diminished but not extinguished, and they will continue to glow for some time yet, an hour perhaps, growing cooler by such gradual degrees that the transition from warmth to cold will be imperceptible, a change so slow that it cannot be observed but only discovered, after the fact, when one realizes that the warmth is gone and cannot say precisely when it left. The clerk's chin lowers very slightly toward his chest. A degree, perhaps two, is the first sign of drowsiness that his posture has betrayed, and it lasts only a moment before he lifts his head again, gently, without alarm, with the unhurried correction of a man who has caught himself beginning to drift and has chosen, for the present, to remain. He is not ready to sleep. He is not ready to stand. He is not ready to leave. He is in the place between all of these states, the quiet center where all possibilities exist, but none has yet been chosen, and he will remain here for as long as the room will have him, which is as long as he wishes, which is a little longer yet. The light in the window holds steady. From the street, it would appear unchanged, that same thin stripe of gold falling across the pavement, the same quiet assertion of presence in a street that is otherwise surrendered to the dark. It does not waver. It is not dim. It burns with the calm, unconscious persistence of something that has forgotten it has the option to stop. And the street, if it could observe such things, would take comfort in it. Not because the light serves any practical purpose, not because it illuminates anything of importance, but simply because it is there, because in a row of darkened windows it remains, a single point of warmth in the cold geometry of the night, proof that somewhere behind the glass and the brick and the curtains, someone is still present, still breathing, still holding their small station against the vast and indifferent dark. It is not a grand thing, this light. It is not a beacon or a signal or a summons. It is only a waiting room, lit by a single gas bracket, occupied by a single man in a dark suit who sits in the second chair from the left and does nothing and waits for nothing and asks for nothing from the night except the right to remain. And the night, generous as it is, grants this without condition, without hesitation, without end. There is a draft, very slight, coming from somewhere near the base of the window frame, where the wood has shrunk over the years and left a gap too narrow to see, but wide enough to admit a thin current of cold air. It moves across the room at floor level, too low and too faint to be felt anywhere above the ankle, and it carries with it the smell of the night, the mineral, damp, cold-tinged smell of London air in the colder months, a smell that belongs to pavements and iron railings and the undersides of bridges, to all the surfaces that the city turns toward the sky, and that the sky, in its indifference, covers each night with dew and soot and the faintest trace of frost. The clerk is not aware of the draft, or if he is, he has long since ceased to notice it, the way one ceases to notice the sound of one's own breathing or the sensation of one's own clothes against one's skin. It is part of the room, part of the night, part of the vast and intricate system of small currents and temperatures and pressures that governs the behavior of air in an enclosed space, and it does its work without acknowledgement, as all such systems do. Somewhere, far off, a church clock strikes the hour. The sound is distant and indistinct, arriving not as separate notes, but as a soft, blurred cluster of tones, the way a voice sounds when heard through a wall, the words lost but the rhythm and the pitch preserved. It might be St. Pancras New Church, whose tower stands a quarter of a mile to the north, or it might be another, the city being full of churches and their clocks, each one counting the same hours and arriving at the same conclusions by slightly different routes. The distant chime confirms what the mantel clock has already told him, and the agreement between the two, the near and the far, the particular and the general, gives the hour a solidity it would not otherwise possess, as though the time has been verified by independent witnesses and found to be accurate. The clerk's right hand, resting on his right knee, moves. It is the smallest of movements, the fingers curling slightly and then uncurling, a gesture that is neither voluntary nor involuntary, but somewhere between the two, the hand rehearsing its own familiar motions in the absence of any object to grasp or any task to perform. He has held pens and ledger books and appointment cards with his hand, has turned keys and opened doors and shaken the hands of patients and written out receipts in a small, precise script that is as much a part of his identity as his face or his name. The hand knows all of these things and remembers them in its muscles and its tendons. And when it moves in this way, this small, purposeless curling and uncurling, it is not reaching for anything but simply keeping faith with its own history, maintaining the readiness that is the hand's fundamental condition, the preparedness to grasp, to hold, to write, to act, even here, even now, even in this room where there's nothing to grasp and nothing to hold and nothing to write and nothing to act. Upon the clock on the mantelpiece, in its casing of black marble, continues its steady measure. 11 o'clock comes with its sequence of chimes, each one identical, each one absorbed by the room as soon as it sounds, the way a sponge absorbs water thoroughly and without remainder. The clerk counts them from habit, though he knows the hour before the first chime falls. 11. The number sits in his mind for a moment, unremarkable, and then it too is absorbed, and the silence returns, and the room is as it was, unchanged, undiminished, complete. He will leave soon. He knows this not because he has decided it, but because he can feel the decision forming somewhere beneath the surface of his thoughts, gathering itself quietly, the way a wave gathers before it breaks. It will not break yet. It is still gathering. But it is there, and he is aware of it, and this awareness is enough. When it comes, he will stand. He will straighten his jacket. He will take his hat and coat from the stand in the hall. He will turn the gas cock on the bracket, and the light will diminish and then fail, and the mantle will cool, and the room will be given over to darkness and to the last, fading warmth of the embers. He will step into the hall and close the door behind him and cross the checkered tiles and open the front door and step out into the night, and the cold will meet him, and the street will receive him, and he will walk the 12 minutes to Marchmont Street with his collar turned up and his hands in his pockets, and his footsteps sounding on the pavement in a rhythm that matches, without his knowing it, the rhythm of the clock he has just left behind. But not yet. Not quite yet. For now, the light holds. The room holds. The chair holds him. And the night, patient and deep and measureless, holds everything, the room and the light and the chair and the man, in its vast, encompassing dark, the way the sea holds a single boat, gently, without effort, without attention, simply by being vast enough to contain it. If you're still listening, if you're still here, let this room hold you too. Let the clock keep time for you. Let the fire warm you. Let the gaslight fall across your face the way it falls across the clerk's face, softly, without demand, asking nothing in return. You do not need to go anywhere. You do not need to do anything. The morning will come when the morning comes, and until then, there is only this, only the quiet, only the warmth, only the slow, immeasurable drift toward rest. Thank you so much for spending this evening here. Sharing the silence with you has been a comfort, and if the night has been kind to you, perhaps you've already drifted off to sleep or been drawn to that gentle place awaiting you by the sound of these words. If you enjoyed your time together, you can stay a little longer by joining our small community, and if you wish to leave a word, even the quietest word, in the comments, it will be gratefully received. But there is no obligation, no rush, and nothing that can wait. Rest well, sleep peacefully, and know that somewhere in a quiet street in London, a single light is still burning. If you enjoyed our story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, comment, and like. Tomorrow is the first day of the rest of your life. Good night.